unsurprising. This is the biggest fight in Japanese history between two, elite Japanese fighters. And I understand styles make fights. I get it. But in this case, I guess what I'm reacting to is, Inoue is what I consider one of these super fighters. His speed, his reflexes, his power. Mike, what's the word I always like to use? Twitchies are different, right? They're elite. And Junto is like as good as it gets for a normally excellent fighter.
And I also think, I just won't be surprised. And as you all know, I already have. I'm going with Junto as a favorite in this, as far as my personal. So it won't be a big upset to me. I can't see someone with his type of technically sound game, with his system, with his work rate. I just don't see guys like that ever as an underdog in any type of fight.
Max Kellerman breaks down the highly anticipated clash between Naoya Inoue and Junto Nakatani, highlighting their contrasting styles, key strengths, and the tactical battle that could decide the fight.
Two top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. The number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in all the world, the monster, Naoya Inoue, takes on number 6 Junto Nakatani at the Tokyo Dome.
Max Kellerman points out that the Naoya Inoue versus Junto Nakatani fight isn't getting much attention in the US, largely because it's in the lighter weight classes, which traditionally draw less American interest, and because the event is taking place in Japan, far from the US audience.
Generally, when you have a clash of top 10 pound-for-pounders, there's a lot of buildup. But this one feels as though, at least from where we're sitting in LA, that it's flown a bit under the radar. Now, in the first place, it's two tiny division fighters, right? Once you get below lightweight, especially featherweight, the American public has a tendency anyway to think, well, they're kind of tiny guys and be a little less interested. They're both Japanese fighters, and so the fight's taking place halfway around the world from here, and they haven't been marketed in this country the way they've been marketed in Japan for obvious reasons. And also, Inoue is about a 3-to-1 favorite, so it's not considered a 50.
Max Kellerman notes that Naoya Inoue enters as a strong favorite at roughly 3-to-1 odds, but cautions against overlooking Junto Nakatani. He compares the matchup to Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield, a fight where a dominant favorite still had to deal with a highly skilled, dangerous underdog capable of testing even the very best.
For Tyson-Holyfield, does this have a little shade of that, where Mike Tyson would have always been a big favorite against Holyfield, right? In retrospect, he shouldn't have been, but at the time he would have been. Then he loses, goes to prison, Holyfield becomes champion. And going into their fight, which had been postponed for years, Mike hadn't looked as good since he was still champ. He had looked better than he had in years, beating the hell out of Frank Bruno. Better than he'd beaten Frank Bruno the first time, even though Bruno was coming off a good win. While Holyfield fought a blown-up middleweight, ultimately, in Bobby Chez, and looked horrible. So heading into that fight, people thought Tyson would win anyway, but now it was like, okay. Inoue looked better than Nakatani last time out. Nakatani really...
When Max Kellerman leaned toward Naoya Inoue as the favorite, boxing insider Mike Coppinger pushed back, arguing the matchup is much closer than it appears, suggesting it's a competitive fight, not the one-sided contest many initially believe.
Much closer to a 55-45 fight, maybe in favor of Inoue. And look, Inoue is he's a future Hall of Famer, first ballot. He's an all-time great, so he deserves that respect. And I was ringside on the call for those 2 fights in December in Riyadh. And like Malik said, that was a really tough style. Nakatani, Sebastian Hernandez, pressure style, Mexican, first fight at 122. So to me, I felt more encouraged going into this fight instead of less. And I just think maybe it's flying under the radar because it's going to be on very early morning in the US. This fight's in Japan. But just this morning they announced, Max, this is a sold-out fight at the Tokyo Dome. They're going to have 55.
Jesse Rodriguez says he respects both Naoya Inoue and Junto Nakatani, calling them elite champions, but gives a slight edge to Inoue because of his speed, power, and experience. He added that he's ready to face the winner anytime, believing a showdown is inevitable as long as he keeps winning.
Down the line, not next, but definitely down the line, would love to see you fight either against Nakatani or Inoue. Do you want to maybe say who you favor in that fight between the two?
I think Inoue wins the fight, just because he has more experience. He's been in the weight division longer than Nakatani has, so I do favor Inoue, but Nakatani, he does have a chance as well, just because he has that kind of one-punch power.
Maybe that could be the big fight. in your hometown, right?
Yeah, hopefully. If not, I don't mind going to Japan either. I love going to Japan. I love
That would
spending.
be cool.
Yeah, I love spending time there. So.
Oh, so you have traveled there before?
Yeah, I've been there plenty of times. But like I said, either San Antonio or Japan. I don't care.
Veteran trainer Joel Diaz believes Naoya Inoue has too much power and precision for Junto Nakatani, predicting a stoppage victory. He argues that Inoue's timing, body punching, and elite finishing ability will eventually break Nakatani down and end the fight before the final bell.
Inoue, you've faced him a couple times against Nakatani. Just how do you think that one goes?
You know, I've been against Inoue twice. You know, and I seen that fighter in person. I mean, I've been in the ring with him. He's fast, he's strong, confident, and I've also been against Nakatani. I've been against Nakatani before with Tito Acosta. I just think that Nakatani will put up a fight, but Inoue will stop him.
Inoue's he's been dropped by a few left hands. Donaire hurt him with a left hand.
But he gets up and he still wins. But I just think that Nakatani, I mean, he's not ready for Inoue yet. I just think that fight will end up in a knockout.
Nonito Donaire, a multi-division world champion, described Naoya Inoue as the toughest and most powerful opponent he has ever faced. He praised Inoue's explosive punching, sharp accuracy, and relentless pressure, admitting their fights pushed him to his absolute limits and clearly showed Inoue's elite-level greatness.
When it comes down to a lot of things, you know, I think the best guy that I faced, and maybe perhaps if I was younger, it might be a different story, but at the moment of who I am in this time, I would say Inoue is the toughest that I've faced, or the strongest that I've faced.
You mentioned Inoue as probably or potentially the best fighter that you faced in your career. What is it about him that gives you that distinction?
I think it was like facing the younger me. You know, there's just a lot of similarities in terms of power, explosiveness, and sometimes intelligence, you know, but I think a lot of it is given the similarities is what makes it.
Chris Algieri expects Naoya Inoue to edge out a close, competitive win over Junto Nakatani, likely by unanimous or majority decision rather than an early knockout. He predicts a tactical, high-level battle with momentum swings, possible knockdowns on both sides, and sharp exchanges driven by both fighters' power, timing, and precision.
So this is another one that's going to be neck and neck. I'm going off of Inoue because of the experience that he has, and who he's done it with. You know, that Fulton destruction was a beautiful thing, and that was all boxing IQ. That was an IQ. That wasn't about speed. That wasn't about power. That was IQ, and he set everything up beautifully with the jab. So yeah, I'm gonna go Naoya Inoue on IQ as well.
All right, it's time for our predictions. Inoue versus Nakatani. I always go first. I'm putting you on.
Mike Coppinger suggested that if Naoya Inoue defeats Junto Nakatani in convincing fashion, he could rise to the #1 spot in the pound-for-pound rankings, overtaking Oleksandr Usyk. However, he noted that it would also depend on Usyk's continued standing and the overall strength of elite competition in boxing at that time.
Does Inoue then have a case for Usyk's #1 pound-for-pound spot? Mike?
Yes, absolutely, Max. I mean, if you're talking about knocking off the pound guy, if he does it in fashion, I think you have to put Inoue #1 at that point. I mean, obviously, especially when you compare Usyk's going to be fighting Rico Verhoeven, right, a kickboxer, so he's not going to be able to really strengthen his resume, even if he blows out Verhoeven. Whereas if Inoue, if he beats Nakatani in fashion, in convincing, I think you have to.
Malik Scott suggested that Naoya Inoue should either be ranked #1 or placed right alongside Oleksandr Usyk in the pound-for-pound rankings. He based this argument on Inoue's elite-level opposition already faced, as well as the dangerous challengers he is expected to meet in the future, strengthening his claim as one of boxing's very best.
Rocky 3, you know, if you start fighting the wrestler or the kickboxer, it makes it hard, especially if people are bringing up, what about Caballel? What about obviously Moses Atama? And you're opting instead, or the names you're mentioning is, how about this kickboxer? How about Deontay Wilder, who's past his prime? And you're 38 years old? I think what Mike is saying has validity. Where are you with that?
I'm with Mike on that totally, especially it doesn't help right now because Usyk is fighting, you know, a kickboxer. He's basically taking a chance with something that many of us wouldn't even consider a risk with the kickboxer. And then when you turn the page and you look at what Inoue is facing and maybe possibly facing in the future, considering Espinoza, considering Van Rodriguez, I would say you have to put him right under Usyk. If not,
okay. I mean, that's a great one. Agree with you on paper. However, again, Inoue has already jumped a bunch of divisions.
Right.
Now, let's not overstate it. In that weight territory, a division is 4 pounds. So it's not like he moved up the way Pacquiao moved all the way up to junior middleweight. But he has moved up a bunch.
He's nice though, Max.
He's nice with his hands, but also he was a devistating puncher until just now.
Yes.
And now you're asking him to go one more division up to fight a killer in that division. You like Inoue's chances more than Shushu's or Angelo Leo or anyone?
I like Inoue. He has a ceiling though. He has a ceiling concerning going up in the weight classes. Inoue.
Yes, but to be clear, I'm not saying I'd pick Inoue over Espinoza.
Right.
You said the best shot. Yes, for me, it's no question because the only elite fighter I think at featherweight is Espinoza. And I agree, Shushu and a couple of more fights will be more ready. I don't think Shushu's ever going to be on the level of Espinoza the way I see him right now. And I think if you talk to people behind the scenes, that's